So we are rolling.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead, Eden.
The funny thing is that's not going to get edited out.
No, it won't be.
It won't, because it's so cute to me.
Also, this will be edited out.
Because it's so cute. It's cute, okay? Friendship is cute.
It's adorable.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Burn This Book, a Banned Books book club where we, Nicolle and Eden, read a banned or challenged book twice a month and discuss its meaning, impact, and censorship to make it more accessible for all readers. Welcome to our bonus episode of Dungeons and Dragons. So joining us today are the hosts of the podcast Adventure AI, Jason Conforto and Tyler Crump. Tell us about yourselves.
Please.
Yeah. Well, so I'm Jason Conforto. So Tyler and I are friends who play Dungeons and Dragons, and we wanted to do a podcast, and there's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons podcasts out there. We wanted to do actual play because we wanted to have fun and have an excuse to play Dungeons and Dragons, because it's hard to find time to play Dungeons and Dragons. But we found a small niche that nobody else is doing, that we've heard to our knowledge, as a podcast, which is playing Dungeons and Dragons with AI. And we let our artificial intelligence, who actually named himself Alex the Language Lord. So we play Dungeons and Dragons with Alex the Language Lord, and some guests, of which Eden has been one.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
And
Season 3.
It's the Revenant Rock. For those of you that are interested, yeah. So that's us.
That's right. We've been playing Dungeons and Dragons most of our youth, which is now long gone, it feels like.
Yeah, and that makes it sound like we knew each other when we were kids. We didn't.
We're not childhood friends. We're adult friends.
Yes.
But we've been playing D&D since we were children.
But not children
in
together.
Your respective.
In our respective parts.
Because when I was a
Separate
child, Tyler wasn't born. Is probably part of that problem.
I actually don't know our age. How old?
Yeah, do you mind me asking how old you
I
both
do
are?
mind.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. Yeah. No,
NPM.
Were you a child of the 80s? Because that is very relevant.
I'm 46.
Okay.
Born in 1977, the same year Star Wars was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
This is the perfect age for this conversation.
I was born in the 80s. Yes. So yes, 85.
85.
Perfect.
Makes me 38-ish, but that doesn't mean that my body's not falling apart.
Okay. The first time I played D&D, Tyler was alive. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was on the Earth. In fact, I pretty much credit my presence on Earth to Jason.
We were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we summoned a demon, and Tyler was born.
And you murdered a few people.
That's how it happened.
What parts of the country were you living in? Did you grow up and play D&D?
I grew up in San Diego, California, and that's where I learned how to play.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm from northern Utah. So.
You're from northern Utah.
Yeah.
Cool. I only ask because as we've learned about the Satanic Panic and its relationship with D&D, there were some little hotbeds those early days. Northern California was one of them. And then the East Coast. And then Middle America. So I guess all of America. But
The hotspot? America.
but specifically, it really started in California. So
Yeah, I think
kind of fun.
That in many cases, like any smaller town that even had heard of Dungeons and Dragons, I'm sure that there was some level of panic, right?
yeah.
Because dragons.
Well, no, it's more the demons and
right.
there is legitimately there are devils and demons and evil things that can happen in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And so I think it was an easy leap to get into the Satanic Panic.
Let's explain the Satanic Panic, because I think we talk about it a lot, but there's a lot of people who genuinely don't know what that means. So,
Nicolle, would you kick us off?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So when we're using the term Satanic Panic, we're mostly talking about the 1980s and 1990s. And it started off with a series of high-profile court cases against different daycare centers. Specifically, the first one was the McMartin Daycare Center. And a parent accused the daycare center of doing satanic rituals on children there. Later on, that parent had been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder and then eventually died.
Was there any sort of truth to there was no ritual at all, like singing a song
evidence.
Before?
No.
Okay.
There was absolutely no evidence. And the way that it was handled, it became one of the most expensive and long-lasting trials in American history. It went from, I have the dates right here, so I'm going to grab them so that you guys can trust me.
Without dates, it's not true.
Yeah, I believe you.
You believe me? Okay, good. It started off in 1983, and the trials ended like 1989, I think. So you might want to fact check that. But
We can fact check it.
But there was no evidence of anything. The way that it was handled was this woman accused the daycare, and then the police got involved, and they started bringing in tons and tons of children to ask them questions. And they even sent home letters to all the parents saying, your child may have been abused. You should ask your kid. Really freaked everybody out. And a lot of children were being asked leading questions. And so they would just say stuff like, yeah, sure. I don't know. One person who was involved in the case later on came out and even said, this guy, Kyle Zerpolo, one of the former McMartin students who made allegations, told the LA Times, it was an ordeal. I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to get out of here unless I tell them what they want to hear. And he explained that he had just been lying the whole time. He was like a 5-year-old kid. Sure. Like, he didn't know what was happening. It was very confusing. But this case, like, it completely exploded, and more parents were starting to accuse daycare centers of abusing their children and using satanic rituals to do it. There was this belief that there's like this organized system of Satanism. Even if you didn't believe in Satan, you still believed that people were practicing Satanism. So you could be progressive liberal and an atheist and still believe that Satanism was just spreading like wildfire. Sure. So that was the beginning of the 1980s. And then D&D steps in, starts to become really popular with kids.
And it's an easy target at that point.
It's an easy target.
And I don't know, like, how much you can blame a parent for something like that, right? Like, if I had my kid in daycare and all this stuff was going on, I would be pretty freaked out. I'd be
and
like,
the concept of daycare is even pretty new.
Yeah. What are we doing with our, like, what happened to our child, right? I think I would be legitimately scared. But yeah, with Dungeons and Dragons, I think this is like the first big story with that. There was this kid, I believe he was a college student on like Michigan campus or something like that, and he went missing, and people thought that he went into like the underground tunnels, the steam tunnels in underneath the campus, and it had something to do with like living out a game of Dungeons and Dragons that he was playing with his friends. Because when the parents hired a private investigator, the private investigator saw some D&D stuff and saw some maps with D&D and was like, hey, these maps could be like maps of the tunnels underneath the campus, and maybe he went down there. And this investigator made up a story about how this kid was trying to live out this D&D adventure under the campus. Turns out the guy really had some mental health issues and ran away. He never went underground, anything like that. Later he ended up committing suicide and had a tragic story and end. But this whole Dungeons and Dragons got swept into this, right? And launched the career of Tom Hanks.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Mazes. What's that movie called?
I think
that was his first movie?
Yeah, his first movie was this story.
way.
It was
Yeah.
a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tom Hanks needs to thank Dungeons and Dragons for his career, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it was like the fictionalized version of the story of James.
Where it
James
actually
Dallas
did happen.
Egbert.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is that he was like a 16-year-old like computer prodigy at college. So like he was already kind of an outsider in the whole situation. And the big tragedy of it for me is a lot of these stories are like, they're distracting from actual problems. James Egbert, I always want to switch his name. James Dallas Egbert clearly had some stuff he could have gotten help. And there are children that really do get abused. But the thing that is frustrating, which we've seen with a lot of things in the last 10 years, is that it distracts from the fact that like abuse usually happens with people you know. It's not usually a random Satanist.
usually not a random.
Coming in.
It's usually a specific Satanist that gets you.
No, I know, but
it's the Satanist that you know that you got to be worried about.
There was a New York Times article that I thought was really great, which everyone should read. It's called "It's Time to Revisit the Satanic Panic" by Alan Uhas, and it was published in 2021. But he goes in and he does like a Vox style kind of article explaining the Satanic Panic. But he explains that, this is a wild thing, that over the course of the Satanic Panic, nearly 200 people were charged with crimes that had to do with Satanism, and dozens were convicted. And many people were eventually freed and found innocent, but it was usually after like 20 something years of being in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. So it has like real world ramifications. Real lives are being ruined by this.
And here we are laughing and joking about it.
Giggling.
You guys are horrible people.
But I do think D&D is interesting because, it comes in in families.
Yeah, I had, so growing up when we were, families, in San Diego when we played with a bunch of people in our church group. And and the bishop's son was not allowed to play with us because we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it was all part of the Satanic Panic, and we got around it in a very nerdy way because we were playing a version of Dungeons and Dragons called Dragonlance. Which is still Dungeons and Dragons. But we just told his parents, the bishop, that we were playing Dragonlance. And he didn't know what that was. And so it was like, so it worked. It was great and fun. But it's funny. I will still talk to grown adults today about playing D&D. And it's not as much anymore, but I still have friends that are like, you shouldn't be playing that. Like that's kind of, it's evil. Like you shouldn't be doing that.
Even now you're saying?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't invite that into your home.
Yeah. And I usually tell them, the type of people that say Dungeons and Dragons are evil are the same people that say Harry Potter is evil. Like it's the same, it's the same group. And it may not be the exact same group, but if I can belittle people who believe that, I feel like I've done my job. That's how I win arguments.
And Jason's a tall guy.
I am a very tall guy.
So he's very good at belittling.
He's very good.
I look down on everyone.
I think it is interesting, though, that because of this fear of demons and stuff in Dungeons and Dragons, I learned, maybe you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or right,
okay,
that
right.
that TSR, that's the company that used to own,
before Wizards of the Coast,
they restricted they took out a lot of the demons and devils until Wizards of the Coast. Our friend Michelle Sutherfield used to work for them. But until they came in
on the coast.
On the coast.
There's a bunch of wizards. You guys heard of Twilight? Vampires, wizards.
I've heard.
It's the same thing.
No, my understanding with a lot of that was in part because when the first books were published in the 1970s. I don't know exactly what year.
1974.
1974. So the first books were published in 1974. They did have demons and devils, but again, generally speaking, the whole purpose was you're the good guy that fights the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you have to have a bad and demons and devils make sense for them to be.
Give you something to fight.
Yeah, it's very clear where the lines of good versus evil kind of thing. Well, at least most of the
most there is this thing in Dungeons and Dragons where you can pick if you want to be a hero, a scoundrel, or a villain, right? And good, neutral, and evil is what they call. And a lot of players, most players want to play good heroes, right? That's what they want to do. And then some want to play rogues and stuff where they can kind of subvert the law and whatnot. But every now and then there are players who want to be the villains. They want to be the bad guys. They want to run campaigns where they're doing evil stuff, and that is a legitimate way to play the game. And so I think there is that argument that they could choose to do that. But I've found that most people, they want to be the heroes. They don't want to be the villains. So
before we get too deep, let's let you two give us a 30-second elevator pitch of what D&D is.
Yeah.
I just realized we just jumped right into it.
Now, I know you've played Dungeon. Have you, Nicolle?
I've played it twice.
She actually, of the two of us, she played it first.
I
did.
Yeah. Nice. Because I think it's kind of more fun to hear people who don't play D&D describe what it is.
Try to describe what
it's make believe. It's a lot of people playing make believe and making it kind of really rule oriented.
Rule oriented.
It's a really structured.
When we talk about your whole thing is about books, right? All of the Dungeons and Dragons books are just rule books.
There's instructions mostly.
They are. It's like
it's a framework.
Volumes and
Yeah.
volumes of just like rules to how to play this game. That's all that is. But yeah, I'll let Tyler.
I would say the way that I've liked to describe Dungeons and Dragons is I call it like group storytelling is more than anything else, right? Where you get the opportunity to get together with friends and to create a story together.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the fact that you are in some sort of like magical environment, or whether you use like different abilities and skills or summoning demons, whatever it is, like that's just the mechanisms and the framework that allows you to create the story together. But that's how I've always described Dungeons and Dragons.
Group storytelling is the
Very
same.
pro-social.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could argue that those detectives and policemen and children played a version of D&D.
I love that take.
Yeah.
Cults are just group storytellers. I don't know if I'd go that far, but
It's not wrong.
no, but I do think that like ultimately a lot of the things when it comes down to it is like the motivation is ultimately money, right? Like they've made a game, they wanted to promote the game, they do the business, they take some of the could you imagine like starting a business and being like, hey, wow, we had this fun thing, we had this great game, we created this board game, we're gonna release it, and the next thing you know, the news is like, this game is evil, and you're like, great, there goes our marketing. Where's our PR person? How do we fix
Either
this?
that. I mean, all news is good news, right? Or all PR is good art. So maybe it really created the how popular D&D got.
Well, it did. I mean, after James Allen,
Dallas.
I thought he went by Dallas.
I don't know. But I do know that after that whole situation, the sales for the basic set increased, and the internet was like dicey on it. It said either like 5,000 went from like 5,000 copies per month all the way up to like 30,000 copies per month.
A huge growth.
Because of like
The attention that it got.
gave so much attention to the, I don't even know what the basic set means, but it seems important.
That's like the basic
And it seems like a big moneymaker.
rules.
Okay,
right?
there you go. Is it?
It's
Okay.
It's the starter set.
Okay.
It's what the minimum amount of information you need to play the game.
It's the most basic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the basic
It's very
set.
basic.
Yeah,
It's
it's,
very
the
basic.
basic set.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
to anyone who plays board games, that piece of paper that you toss to the side,
Yes.
The one
That's
that
the
I like
basic
feel
set.
Josh just
that's
looking
what
at.
all the books of D&D are.
Oh gosh, so overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is ridiculously overwhelming.
Seriously, I played a couple times, and just doing the research over this last week, I was just like, Eden, I don't even know how to talk about this. I don't know. But Eden found a really good quote by Gary Gygax in response to what you were saying.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, that was really good.
Oh yeah. So this happened on 60 Minutes. They brought the mother who founded the one-person advocacy group.
Wait, is
They
that
were-
the name of the advocacy group,
Oh, no.
or it was an advocacy group of one person?
The advocacy group of one person bothered about Dungeons and Dragons, or the acronym BAD.
Nice.
So she and the
Like that
It's
head.
kind of cute too. Bothered.
bothered about Dungeons and
I
Dragons.
do think people are dying
Bad.
because of it, and it bothers me.
Just like
Satanism bothers me.
mildly inconvenienced about
It's like
Dungeons and Dragons.
it's so inoffensive, but
yeah. But anyway,
she made
Gary
it on 60
Bless
Minutes.
her heart.
Bless her heart. Gary Gygax said, basically, this is make believe. No one is martyred. There's no violence there. To use an analogy with another game, who is bankrupted by a game of Monopoly? Nobody is. The money isn't real. There is no link, except perhaps in the mind of those people who are desperate, who are looking desperately for any other cause than their own failures as a parent.
Yeah. I mean, so like, he was mad about this game he created. Yeah.
Yeah, Gary takes his baby and
Yeah.
you call it ugly. And
Yeah.
he's just like, well, you're a bad You're a bad parent.
Yeah.
I have an ugly baby then.
I mean, that being said, I have been in heated Monopoly games before.
Yeah.
And so some horrible things
Right.
can happen in the name
Right.
of Monopoly, for sure.
Yep.
Antisocial things, I
Yeah.
argue.
Yes.
My favorite is Eden's comment under that goes, harsh.
Oh yeah, I wrote under that. Harsh.
On our notes.
Harsh.
Like reading
Harsh.
that as a parent is like, oh. What things am I like turning a blind eye to because I don't want it to be, I don't want to address like a major thing. Granted, my kid is 3, so there's not much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. But I think a lot of the cases, right, when you think okay, especially we're talking like the 90s, right? So this is like, no, we're not talking about the 90s.
80s.
We're talking about the 70s and the 80s. So this is pre-internet. This is restricted levels of information. These are people who, when they wanted to get stuff, like they had to go to the library and hope that they had some information, or it was like the name, maybe it'll be in the encyclopedia next year, right? And I can learn about it. So to some degree, like, sure, you can't blame parents entirely for being like, hey, I want to be able to.
You can't blame them,
children,
or for
things that they think are scary.
Yeah,
right?
and it's not the worst thing to be bothered about this stuff.
Yeah.
Parents should be bothered.
It's okay for people, it's okay for parents to be
mildly
Mildly
concerned.
mildly bothered. But I think just like many other things you two talk about on your podcast, right? Like one of the biggest thing is like bridging the gap of understanding. And I think that for me, like when I was growing up, like my parents heard the same thing when I was like, hey, I'm going to play Dungeons and Dragons. And they're like, I don't know if that's good, right?
Right.
So for me, it was like, okay, how do I bridge this gap between where my parents think what is going to happen and what really actually does happen in these sorts of environments? And it's like, okay, well, let's come together and let's look at these books together and let's talk about how this is. And ultimately, when we got to the point that we were playing Dungeons and Dragons in my house, it was like, you're playing here. Like my parents were like, all right, if you're going to do satanic rituals,
You're going to do it under our roof or not at all.
supervised by us, so you do it right. No, but it was,
You will use our summoning circle in our basement.
but that's how my parents' approach was just like, hey, like if our concern about it is whatever it may be, then they took the approach of like supervision. It's like, okay, well, I can sit in the next room and I can listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And if they're saying like, oh, we're gonna be,
We should murder Mom.
Yeah,
Can we put the book down for a bit, guys?
This doesn't feel good.
yeah. I mean, we were playing in the kitchen with all the sharp knives and everything, but
If you saw a group of kids from the 80s playing Dungeons and Dragons, you'd be like, oh, these sweet nerds.
you would.
When you see kids doing it today, you're
Yeah.
still like, oh,
You're
these
like,
sweeties.
Do you guys want to go out and drink or something?
Partly true. My parents did take that approach. They were like, look, my kid, once we started doing it, it was just like, no, 100%. My parents would rather we got together as kids, played these fantastical stories of us pretending to be wizards, fighting fake dragons.
Yeah.
Right.
Being forced to do math.
Being forced to do math.
Yeah.
And reading.
Actually. Yes,
Yeah.
math and reading.
So much reading.
While eating snacks. It's like that.
While eating
or doing something else that could potentially be much worse, right? And for my parents, it was like, once they saw what it was, it was like, no big deal. Now, that being said, I think Jason and I both have had experiences of very weird people in D&D.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
Us.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
You go first.
So we have, they're very similar experiences where I'm like 13 years old, and this guy I know who's in his 30s is like, hey, you play D&D. Do you want to play D&D with me? I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I love,
sure.
Let's go for it. So he and I get in his car, and we drive from North County, San Diego downtown, and we go into this guy's house, and I'm just this kid, and I find myself in this like small, like smoke-filled room with a bunch of adults, like who are my age now, and just as nerdy as I am now, like playing D&D with these adults in this place, and I'm just like the only kid in a room full of adults that I have never met before in my life.
Whoa,
and like
that is so stressful.
it was one of those things where it's like I'm kind of uncomfortable, but I get to play a wizard. Yeah. I'm like, yeah. And fortunate they weren't, well, I'm not going to say that because we're going to keep this family friendly, but you have a story, right?
No, well, see, for mine, it was like we would have friends over, we'd invite friends, and as word kind of got out, more people became more comfortable with Dungeons and Dragons, that they were like, hey, can I bring somebody? And we're like, cool, we can bring somebody. And then one person was like, hey, can I bring somebody? It's like, yeah, cool. And then this like 45-year-old guy shows up who, while we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, is
so
occasionally
old,
taking smoke breaks. I know, so at the time, absolutely so old. And we're like in high school, like we're like 14, 15 years old, and this like 45-year-old guy, and it was just like my parents were just like, why is there a fully grown man here? And he's like smoking out front, like who is this guy? again.
That being said, I am that person now. Aside from smoking, like I've had like last time I played with a bunch of kids, I had like 16 kids over to my house where I'm like playing Dungeons and Dragons with a room full of like 11 and 12-year-old, 13-year-old
But did their
kids.
parents know?
No. Are you kidding? I had to like text them privately and send them notes and things to get them over. I left trails of candy from their house to my house. Yeah. I had to pick them up in my van. Yeah. It was their parents didn't. No, yes, their parents know.
Yeah.
And I invited several of their parents, like Tyler, who brought his. So I wasn't the only adult in the room, but I have played D&D with a whole range of ages and whatnot. And
I think a lot of it comes back, like what we were saying before, is like the idea of kind of bridging the gap between people, what they thought it was, and like Dungeons and Dragons has come a long way, right? From the point where.
Oh, I do have.
Where it was. Oh, do you have another story?
Just one more story. So I played with a kid in my neighborhood. He was like a senior in high school, and my daughter was a year younger than him. And she said that they would walk on campus and they'd see him, and she'd say to her friend, "That's my dad's friend." That's the kid my dad plays D&D with.
That's pretty cute, honestly.
Yeah.
It's
but also a little weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's very weird.
But it is fascinating how like easily these stories, like how thin the line is between cute versus like creepy.
Yes.
Like the guy picking you up when you're a kid. That's so
feels very creepy.
unbelievably creepy. And I think that's like the D&D thing is for a lot of parents where it's like, it's cute, but also it's so close to scary that we don't know how to handle that.
And I should say, I have teenage kids that I play with as well, and they're there when I'm playing with these other kids. So it's more like I'm trying to provide an experience for my kids.
Yeah, and your experiences aren't creepy. Like you participating, it sounds like such a community thing.
It does,
and like it sounds
reaching
so
out to parents and saying, "Hey, like this is a fun get together,
a safe space for kids and stuff." But like it's just really interesting, and I think like the tiny bit of creepy factor with different generations hanging out, really people kind of latch onto. That's something we've learned about reading. Like there could be like one sentence that will freak someone out. Yeah. And the whole book then is like banned. And you're like, whoa. And I think like to give the benefit of the doubt when I was thinking about your parents, I think a lot of parents, especially in the 80s, had kind of gone through, like that was like Ted Bundy times. Yeah. And there was some creepy stuff. And also there was like, we had the Charles Manson stuff, you know, and people were carving 666 and whatever and their body parts, and that was on TV. And like, I think that like the reality of evil was very upfront
and the milk
personal.
Carton kids, right?
Yeah,
right in front of your face all
day.
day.
So that was very personal, and so I could see like I have a lot of compassion for that, and even the QAnon people today, who I think that it's like obviously a carryover,
a predecessor.
Yeah, is like they're still in that mindset.
Headspace.
They're in Headspace. I have that app.
The app.
They're in that app of Headspace.
This podcast brought to you today
by Headspace. I wish. I know. But I do have a lot of compassion for that because I think like I didn't experience anything. That was never on my news situation. True. Mine was the Elizabeth Smart Columbine era. Yeah. So I'm very aware of like that kind of stuff to the point of paranoia. Yeah. And so I do have compassion for that, but it is cool to see like how that's changed into this community oriented, really pro-social, really like beautiful, creating mentorship with kids. That's really cool. And but if I was still really stressed out about like the Ted Bundy life, absolutely, it would be like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, it is true. Like the whole evil thing, right?
Yeah.
Because like even now, I don't know. I don't feel like I hear people referring to things as like evil as much now.
As problematic.
Maybe it's just me, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that there's still, and this is one of the things that I personally have issues with, but like I think it's like another version. I think we were talking about this a little bit, but it's like another version of what was happening with the Dungeons and Dragons of being able to say, hey, we're good Christian folks, and then you know D&D falls on the opposite side of this line, and I think that that's still kind of what's happening today. I don't think we quite. I guess it may be related to your article, right? The Satanic Panic, the idea of being like, there is something that draws a line between what is considered righteous and what is not. Yeah. And I think when it comes to like identity politics today, that it's very easy for people to be like, in America, Christianity is that line, right?
Yes.
And then, Jesus is the one who draws that line. And because you're either on this side or you're on that side. And that if any of your beliefs or policies or support or ideas, if a single one is on the wrong side, then that means that anything you do or say cannot be trusted, right?
Yeah.
And, again, I think, D&D has kind of like moved past that, where it's no longer in that phase where people look at Dungeons and Dragons and say, oh, this is evil, this is bad. So they've just gone into like general entertainment. And I think that's just an evolution of how that's been.
And came there with a lot of pop culture stuff, right?
So much pop culture stuff.
With comic book movies coming out and
Stranger Things,
right? All these things, like all of a sudden, like it's cool to be a nerd. It's cool to be in all this stuff, and you're like, finally,
I know, for real.
Shout out to the first media nerd, Seth Cohen.
So
the OC.
It's awesome. There's also another side of Dungeons and Dragons and role playing in general that I think is really good that doesn't get talked about very much, and that's how it affects the LGBTQ community. And I don't know if you've spent a lot of time in this space, or but a lot of kids who are LGBTQ will play Dungeons and Dragons because it's an opportunity for them to put on a persona and try something, right? And these kids are in the closet for so long, and they feel trapped by who they are, and now they get to play a game where they get to pretend to be something, right? And often they get to pretend to be what they actually are, right? And it's a cool way to experience this. I remember messing up once with a transgender kid who I didn't know was transgender, and she wanted to play a character aligned with her gender before she came out, right? And before she transitioned. So she wanted to play a female character. And I was like, maybe you shouldn't play a female character. Maybe it might be better to play a male character so that people refer to you as male and whatnot. And I didn't realize that at the time. Yeah. She was looking for an outlet to express her female side that she never had. And later when she came out and I found out that she was transgender, I looked back at that moment and I thought, what was I getting out of putting up that barrier for her on that?
Yeah.
And kind of really shifted my thoughts on how playing a different gender in that game can actually be a healthy experience for some of these kiddos. And so it was kind of eye-opening for me, and something that I try to be aware of when playing Dungeons and Dragons with individuals is that this could be a healthy thing and a way to express a part of themselves that gets silenced for so long of their lives.
Yeah, that's so
really
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's gorgeous. I don't even know my word. I do have a quick question, real quick.
Yeah.
So why do you both love Dungeons and Dragons? Like, what attracted you to the game when you were kids, and has that evolved, that attraction to it?
So for me, so it's multiple parts, right? For me, it's like the number one thing was because we were in the 1900s.
Right.
Technology was not as good as it is today, right?
I didn't have a video game.
But partly true, right? Like there were just not games that were structured like in a way that allowed you to have the level of freedom and choice that Dungeons and Dragons allows you to have, right? Every game has rules, and those rules are oftentimes very strict and explicit, and like video games, as cool as they are, you can only do so much when you have to essentially code every single possible outcome that can happen in the game. So for me, Dungeons and Dragons was always just like, oh, it's a game that we can play where there was like no limits. Like it was like whatever you wanted to do, we could do. Whatever you wanted to decide, there was a consequence. And to me, that was fun. It was fun to be able to have something so open when it came to creating stories and having experiences and just like enjoying time together with friends, that you were essentially unrestricted in a way. And that, to me, that was kind of what the allure was. I don't know, Jason.
I had a similar experience. I actually grew up illiterate, so I didn't learn how to read till I was like 16 years old. And I remember I had a best friend who he would actually read to me Choose Your Own Adventure books, right? And I'd go to his house and we'd play. And he was a big reader. He was smart and just a super nerd, like one of the nerdiest guys. I love him to death. He's still one of my best friends. But he would read to me these books and take me on these little adventures and whatnot. And I remember when we were in elementary school, we had a field trip to SeaWorld. And so we were on the bus for like an hour and a half driving down to SeaWorld. And the two of us were on a bench together. And we spent like that whole time playing D&D in our minds. And I still remember him like describing this dragon that I was fighting and me like this like perfect hero going around and like letting me make choices. We didn't have any dice. We didn't have any books. We didn't have any rules that we were following. We were just telling this Dungeons and Dragons story together where I got to be the hero. And it was like the funnest experience that I had ever had. And like, I've been chasing that experience since like I was a little kid. I really have. And like, and then when we hit junior high, he finally got the books and we started playing with a group of friends. And there was 5 of us that played together. Just, I look back at those experiences with my closest friends and just like treasure the story that we told together over years playing this game with the same characters that we had over years. And then transition into when I became a father and I have these 2 sons that love to play D&D with me, and we would play with a couple neighbor kids and a couple adults in the neighborhood. We got this mix like kids and adult group, and we played for a few years, and I realized that I got to be in my kids' campaign that they will remember. Like I get to be a part of that group with them, and this story that we told over a few years together, like we'll always have that. We'll always be able to refer to those characters and those moments and that story and universe that we created together. It's like that's what I get out of Dungeons and Dragons is this like just awesome bonding that I get with people that I love.
That's cool.
And it's just as good, if not better, than like that co-experience of like reading a book together. Right? I feel like everyone kind of had this. Not everyone, but mostly everyone had kind of like this Harry Potter experience, right? Where everyone like knows Harry Potter. We grew up together with it and we experienced it. Like what Jason's saying is like, it's like this, your own little universe that you have, like the Harry Potter experience where you know everything and you've seen the characters and you've had these adventures together and you can always lean back on and be like, oh, wow. Remember that time that, it's fun.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah. My daughter's 3. She really loves stories right now. So Greg, my husband, he just showed her Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, the movie. And I'm
nodding my head, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
Like, you know.
That's a go on.
Yeah. Right. It feels like a deep cut, but it sounds cool.
I never heard of it, but apparently Greg grew up with it. Oh, okay. And he's sitting there watching it with Mabel, and he's like, oh, I used to like think about that all the time. And like, this is how I used to draw it. And then he would draw it for Mabel. And so now they're creating memories based off of stories. And Greg writes his own tabletop role-playing games because he thinks D&D is too kind of. Sorry, Greg.
Eden also has done that though too. The last one I played was yours.
Remember,
true.
Nerds are cool now, right? Nerds are cool now.
I wrote a 1-sheet role-playing game called Roses and Reasons, and it was based on the Bachelor franchise.
Oh, so good.
The players are the suitors. Good. And then you have to try and win over the NPC.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
10 out of 10 recommend.
It's a RPG dating sim.
Really
Got it.
Good. Yeah, exactly.
It did feel like Eden kind of just chose who she wanted though at the end. That it didn't really have a lot to do with the rules. I was gonna say that.
That one. It was my first time ever like game mastering a game, so I like panicked at the end. I was like, I pick myself.
Are you kidding me? It was like a feminist twist. I don't need a man, and it was like, oh my gosh.
I'm off this Bachelor game show. I'm feeling single for the rest of my life.
Franchise sucks now. It was really good though.
But Greg and I met. Well, we started to get to know each other carpooling to a D&D game.
That is so cute.
And then we actually have a painting in our house that my sister-in-law painted for our wedding of our D&D characters, because my D&D character...
What?
was a half orc named Ulga, and his was a halfling monk.
Nicole's face right now is what I love about Dungeons and Dragons, because there are people that hear that story and think that's totally normal, and then there are these people that have this
I am shook.
It's like this like sweet appalled look on your face where it's like, I love everything you're saying and I have so much less respect for you.
So many questions. I've just been in your house. Which painting is this?
She's like, is it
you've
framed?
Seen it. It's
is
when
it
you
framed?
walk down the stairs.
It's that one?
It's the big pink one.
Yeah.
It's very abstract. Is it abstract?
It's abstract. It's abstract.
Okay.
So like you have to kind of look for the orc's face, and she's cradling
him, of course.
a little halfling. So people often think it's like, oh, like
baby.
Is she holding a baby?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's me holding Greg. Greg's my baby.
Greg's my baby. Yeah. This is beautiful. You have to send us a photo of it.
I will send a photo.
Yes,
Yep.
Absolutely. I got to see that.
Oh, I do too.
Like, you have repulsion on your face.
Well, I'm just like, I've never heard this story, and I've been in her house so many times, and I've commented on that painting like multiple times. Being like, yeah, I've been like, that's gorgeous.
Yes, it's gorgeous.
You've been like, right, and I've been like, yeah,
See
and
that
like,
baby I'm
no
holding?
decision to tell me like, that's me as a half orc. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And that baby's my husband.
Yeah, there's like this whole universe. That's what I'm learning. There's a whole universe that I'm just not part of, and I like will never understand. And it's okay.
It's true. It's true.
It's true, and it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
no, it's 100%
It's okay.
okay.
I'm busy. It's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be invited anyway. It's fine.
Remember, nerds are cool now. Now you not
Nerds
getting
are so
invited to Dungeons and
cool.
Dragons, that makes you the uncool person. No.
I know. Trust me, I know.
Yeah, you just got to start your own group. That's all.
Yep.
It's easy. You just need 100 books.
That's the thing I love about D&D being more accessible now is previously, this was pre-Stranger Things, so not many people...
Eden's got a little bone to pick with Stranger Things.
It sounds like it.
Well, I stopped watching after the second season because I got really spooked. Well, we talked about it in our Goosebumps episode. I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. But I would walk into Dragon's Keep, the local nerd store.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
First thing you notice is, oh, they forgot about deodorant in here.
That is.
Yep. And
It does catch you
Still
off guard.
prevalent. Yeah.
It's still part of the
then
brand.
when you sit down,
That'd be funny to have D&D brand deodorant. It's just it's just like a
just
piece of
nothing.
plastic that you rub under your arm.
You never run out.
That sounds like a failing business.
It's make
plan.
believe. Yeah, you don't need to buy new ones ever.
It's called D20.
Yeah.
20.
yeah, you just sell them in different stereotypes. And
It's
yeah.
D4U.
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 Gross.
But yeah, I would go into these open community, anyone invited to come, just bring your character. And I would get so many eye rolls during that because I'm like trying to do math really quick in my head and then like not really understanding like what like modifier I'm supposed to be adding to this situation that I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not friendly.
Oh.
But then now that, post Stranger Things, I get to play with people who are much more understanding.
The group got less exclusive.
Yeah, the group got less exclusive and nicer smelling too.
You know, a lot of people who haven't played, when you invite them to play, they're like, I don't know how. I don't know how to play.
Yeah.
And if I go, everyone's going to think I'm dumb and I shouldn't go. And the truth is Dungeons and Dragons is a community game where we need more players. And we love new players and love teaching new players and sharing the game. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I've always wanted to play, but I don't know how, just find people that do and say, hey, I want to learn how to play, and just watch what happens to their face and how much information they're going to give you.
Jump in my car, little child. Come on, let's go.
They will. They will baby bird you. They will baby bird you. They will mother hen, and they'll come in and they'll be like, "Come, join the flock."
Yes. We've been waiting for
Yes.
you.
Yeah. And if you're
Empty
and
chairs.
if they really
We've been
like
summoning you for
Yeah.
years now.
if they really like you, they will give you gifts like dice that you could
Yes.
use. They will like provide them for you. Yeah.
That's so cute.
I took my niece to Dragon's Keep because she was really interested in playing, and I'm like, I'll take you there.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Because I
know what a
want more
dragon
dice.
smells like?
Well, yeah, that was a funny trip because we bumped into some personalities there that I'm like, yeah, you can expect these next time you go to, if you ever go to a nerd store by yourself, this is what you expect. Yeah.
It is cool because it does feel, and I've actually been really impressed. So we're recording this in Utah, and I've been really impressed by the fact that like Utah does have like a huge community of live action role play and these tabletop games. I mean, there's like a mall in Provo that has like a monthly market of like medieval and I don't know, but it's awesome.
Like Imagine Dragons eggs. Those are what's for sale.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Not Imagine Dragons, the band.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Imagine with your brains some dragon eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. But
I was imagining the other dragon.
yeah.
The Imagine Dragons.
You're
eggs.
imagining the band's eggs.
Like they have eggs now?
You're like, it's a cool band.
Are
thing.
they D&D
It's not satanic at all.
Everything's D&D themed.
themed?
Ultimately, yes.
Honestly, but it's really cool, and it's really cool to see how inclusive it is getting. And I wonder how much of that has to do with Stranger Things, or if it's just the kids that grew up in the 80s and are now having their own kids that are old enough to do this, like yourselves, that are inviting community. And you're cool people.
Very
and
cool
so,
people.
Seriously, you guys have cool vibes.
For the most
and
part.
I wonder if that has a lot to do with it too. Is just like that age, it's that generation is now mentoring the next. And yeah, it's really neat though. Honestly, as someone who's not part of a community, I do feel very accepted.
Did you say not part of the community or?
The
Oh, I thought you said a community.
I'm not really part of any communities right now. We'll
As
get
someone,
into it.
as someone who's
I've
never
talking to my
been a part of a
therapy.
community.
Yeah, I've been talking to my therapist a lot about it. But really, you have no idea how deep this
Goes
water
very
goes.
deep.
Yeah.
You're like, can we move on to another part?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I do have another question.
Oh, yeah,
how did
let's
you
hear
guys
it.
like the D&D movie that happened?
Oh,
That
yes.
occurred.
I loved it.
Oh, I love that.
Keep going.
I thought it was way better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was really fun, and I tried not to be a D&D snob about it
Right.
because there's a lot of things that I'm like, we should have the bard cast a spell at
Yeah.
least once in the game, but you know,
I wish
think
I'd seen it with all of you.
yeah. But you know what? I had so much fun, and
Cool.
I had a blast watching it with my kids, and
Cool.
like, yeah, it's a great show.
Yes. There's actually 3 movies that I'm aware of.
actually.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the nerd thing. Actually, there are
Actually.
3
Referring to
Dungeons
the
and
Chris
Dragons
Pine one,
movies.
okay.
You know, but when you think about it,
The
though,
hot guy
it's
one.
funny because I'm looking it up. Right, for anyone knows, there was one that was in 2 Dungeons and Dragons self-titled Dungeons and Dragons that had Jeremy Irons was in it. Do you guys know? Who he
Oh,
is?
I know Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, he was
Scar.
in that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, from he's Scar from
Lion
the
King.
Lion King. Yeah, Jeremy Irons was in that one.
Or as Mabel
You know a
calls
little
him,
too
Uncle
much
Scar.
about.
You know,
Lion
Jeremy
King is
Irons.
my testimony.
I guess there was another one.
Foundation of religion.
But yes, you are talking about the one that has Chris Pine, right?
Absolutely.
So if
Sorry.
that's the one we're going to be talking about. I'm just kidding.
But tell us your unadulterated.
No,
No, give us your adulterated one.
no, what is this? What's your podcast rated? No, I'm
It's
just kidding.
actually M.
Oh, is it really? Oh, because
We
you talk
talk
about
about
really
child
interesting
abuse a lot.
stuff. Yeah. Okay. Well,
A lot of content.
There's a
No.
lot of content more.
no, it's a joke. I actually thought I'm kind of in the same boat as Jason. Like my expectations generally were actually pretty low. Not because like those types of movies suck. They really actually most of the time they do. But because oftentimes they just try to like jump on the bandwagon of the brand and like they think that the brand is going to carry the story. And it's like, oh well, you know, oh yeah, if we just throw Ghostbusters on it, then we don't have to do any writing. It will just sell and okay, right? So not that Dungeons and Dragons was really huge, but I think it was time. I think that the idea that, you know, Stranger Things and like other things that are like with a like critical role in all the Dungeons and Dragons becoming so big, I think it was time for a good Dungeons and Dragons movie, and I think they did a good job.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think what I really liked about it is that it did capture a few pieces of what I would consider like general tabletop just goofiness, right?
Cool.
Where it's like when you get a bunch of people together and you're just like playing role-playing games, you're already a bunch of nerds anyways, right? So it just ends up getting a little goofy. And I think there were a few things that they did in there where like you're like, yeah, this is totally believable that would happen in a real game.
And I think that's interesting too, because this whole thing, most of this was talking about like satanic panic, but the truth is most D&D games, as serious as the dungeon master wants the game to be,
Oh, and they try so hard.
it just ends up ridiculously silly and just, like fart jokes everywhere.
My wife's
the greatest.
My wife was telling me they started this D&D group up at this organization called Encircle, and they spent like 25 minutes stealing each other's drinks. Like that's the kind of stuff where
so funny.
You're like, people are like, oh, it's like, oh, the Satanists, they're gonna be doing this stuff. They're summoning demons. No, they're stealing each other's drinks. They're making fart jokes. They're like running around, like pushing things over, pushing cows over or something. It's just like all this, using their magic to make big things small. That and just throwing things around. It's mostly just like hilarity. But
my first campaign, it was at a work. Yeah, it was a work campaign. And so one of my coworkers, he would roll his dice every so often and he'll say, I roll for farts. And depending on what he rolls, he describes the type of fart that came out of his bottle.
I hate that so much.
And it could be in the middle of a serious situation. Whenever he felt like it, I roll for farts.
And believe it or not, in Eden's house, there's a painting
of that fart. It's kind of abstract, but it's the one with her like cuddling a fart,
which is
holding
Greg.
it,
which is Greg.
Which is Greg.
A little silent but deadly Greg.
I have another question.
Okay.
I like announcing my questions. Did you have any misgivings, or did you feel like the D&D community at large had misgivings after Stranger Things came out, and more people kind of made it like cool, like, or was that fine? Because I feel like it going like
we liked D&D before it was cool.
Out. Yeah, like it's a sellout now.
No, not at all.
Cool.
Not at all.
Yeah, I actually think that as much as there might have been some level of gatekeeping of being like, whatever, dumb. There's always going to be people who are like, you don't belong here. But I think the general consensus was like, oh, great, more people.
Right? we can actually play.
More people to fit in my basement.
Yeah,
so cute.
I've never been in a community before.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
Therapist.
The general joke.
To join one.
The general joke that comes with Dungeons and Dragons is that the hardest thing about playing Dungeons and Dragons is scheduling.
Yeah.
Right? Scheduling is the worst thing ever. That's the greatest demon that everyone has to fight is everyone's schedule.
Yeah.
So the idea of being like, oh, look, more people to participate, I think the general consensus was like, oh, great. People saw it on TV and they're like, oh, this is cool now. They're not going to make fun of me anymore after I've been inviting them to join us so many times. Now they're actually maybe going to join us. And then if we have more people that can come, our likelihood of actually playing is greater. So that was my thought on overall was just the response was always just like, cool, like really come join us, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We need friends.
And I think generally, also for any of you who do know Dungeons and Dragons, the ultimate goal of bringing people into D&D is to get them to be able to run their own campaign.
So that you can be a player. You can play.
It's an MLM.
It's an MLM.
Scheme.
It really is.
With like 10-year-old kids.
It really is. Yeah. Come in. If you join us and then you run your own campaign and then you get 3 other people to join. That's really how it works.
What advice do you have for parents who are concerned about their kids playing this game?
To play with them.
Okay.
Number one.
Yeah, that's the best way to do that is just to play with them, invite them and join a group yourself and play with them and use your imagination with their imagination and have fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that is not an option for you,
yeah,
absolutely not an option. I would say you get new kids. Yes, just trade them out. No, if it's absolutely not an option, I would say, and Jason, maybe you would have a better recommendation for this than I would. I would say that there's either some podcasts that you could listen to.
Yeah, there's one where they play with artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah, Adventure AI.
A podcast called Adventure AI that you could listen to. That would
be my recommendation.
That's the podcast.
Skip season 3. It was kind of a dip.
That's not true. Season 4 actually was the one that was really good. We actually may delete that season eventually, just call it the lost seasons of Alex the Language Lord. But I think that the thing about it is there's a lot of resources. So I think you could go to podcasts like Adventure AI. That's our podcast. There are a few others out there. You could find some that are more like less mature. There's probably some that are a little bit cleaner that you can listen to. There are people who do live games on like Twitch. So you can find like streaming services or YouTube. You can find videos and like you can just watch them. And to some degree, like you'll be like, okay, yeah, these are like some, maybe they're a little weird. Maybe there's some nerdy guys. Maybe they dress up, guys and gals or whatever it may be. I was like, but it will give you a pretty good idea of what the game is and how the game works. And it's a pretty good resource. You can take a look at it. There's also, even if you go to like the actual official websites of like Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons and Dragons, if you look that up, there is like the set of the basic rules. And if you really truly love your children, you actually dedicate time to looking into things that they care about, then
no guilt trip.
But if you did,
you're a better parent.
if you're good at parenting, you could go there and like you can actually the basic rules are free, right? Like you can pull down the basic rules and you can actually read through it and you'll see that's like
it's a rule book.
It's a rule book. It's like any other game. Like it's just like it's basically it's literally as like Eden said. It's like really no different than you open a box of Monopoly and you pull up a rule book, and that's literally what you're gonna get.
The rule book is just 10,000 pages long.
Yeah,
it's the only difference.
That's the difference.
And there is this a little bit of like when you first start running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign where you're the dungeon master and you're in charge of the story and you've got players living in your world. That like when I first did that, I thought, the D&D police are going to come to my home and they're going to tell me all the rules that I'm breaking. Right? And all this. But the truth is like the success of a game, because this is a game that you're playing with people, but there is no like win or loss.
Yeah.
Right? This is an ongoing game of storytelling. And so every time, like, you just have to remind yourself, if everyone had a good time, you had a successful evening.
Right.
And that's what you follow. And so sometimes you got to change the rules or make up new rules or ignore rules for a little bit and figure things out. And it's okay if you do it wrong, because you really can't. These are just like guidelines that you follow, and it's pretty freeing once you allow yourself to be like, I'll do whatever rule I want to do, and that's how we're going to do it.
Absolutely.
So cute. Honestly, I love this.
What other questions? You got more questions?
Those are my only questions, really.
Okay.
What about you, Eden?
No other questions. Well, I guess, do we want to give Alex the Language Lord something to say to close us out?
I think we should.
To close it out.
We should give Alex a little prompt on, you know what? I think would be a fun prompt. So Alex, why don't you have us tell us why D&D is satanic and should not be played by children and families. So I want Alex to kind of explain, be the bad guy, because we usually make Alex a bad guy. So I would like to hear his little monologue on why we shouldn't play Dungeons and Dragons. And now here's where our podcast differs from you.
Well, we can ask him. Let's see. Should we just say, hey, Alex? Let's see. Your question was, we did bring Alex with us. We didn't ask him anything else until now. Alex is really good at just like sitting by the side. So we can ask Alex and say, hey, Alex, tell us a little bit why D&D is satanic and should not be played by children and families. I don't know.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Alex, what do you think?
I'm sorry, but that statement is not accurate. Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, is not satanic, and there is no credible evidence to support the claim that it is harmful to children or families. D&D is a tabletop role-playing game that has been enjoyed by millions of people of all ages since its creation in the 1970s. It encourages creativity, problem-solving, teamwork, and storytelling. The misconception that D&D is satanic or harmful is rooted in a moral panic from the 1980s when some individuals and groups wrongly associated the game with occult practices. However, these claims have been widely debunked, and D&D is recognized as a form of entertainment and a social activity that promotes imagination and strategic thinking. Many families and children have found D&D to be an enjoyable and educational experience, fostering social interaction and creativity. It's essential to base opinions and decisions about activities like D&D on accurate information and not on unfounded myths or rumors.
Wow, it's like Alex was listening to us this whole time.
He didn't even need to record this at all. He could have just done that. Thanks again for taking another job of mine. Thanks. Love it.
This is sensitive.
I'm the only whistleblower when it comes to AI. Everyone is so into it, and I just keep getting burned. So
maybe it's time you learn a new skill.
Trust me, I'm going to a coding camp probably. Okay. Probably, as everyone does.
I like the sound of that, though. Burn This Book by Eden Wen and Alex the Language.
Oh my
Oh my gosh. Eden probably likes the sound of that too. Cradle that little monster in her arms.
This is me holding Alex. And that little fart is my old co-host.
Nicolle. We don't hear from her anymore. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah,
thanks for having us on your show.
Yeah.
This
I
has
encourage
been so
our
cool.
listeners to listen to Adventure AI.
Yes.
I'm on season 3.
Ooh.
The thing that I loved about being on your podcast was that it broke down the intimidating factor of being a dungeon master.
Because we were so bad at it. These guys can do it.
No, because you introduced AI into it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I could use AI as just like a brainstorming buddy of like, okay, I want this to be the theme that I want to go for in this campaign. Give me some ideas.
Yeah.
And it just spat out ideas, and you refined that on the show and all of that. So yeah. Thank you for a fun time on your podcast.
Thank you for a fun time on our podcast.
You guys
you're
welcome.
So great. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel more community oriented. I'm excited to advocate for D&D. Not that I've ever been in a situation to do so, but I'm hoping to find it. I'm hoping to find those people that are against it.
You haven't yet. You will.
Yet.
Everyone will.
I'm
Everyone
asking for
does.
it.
Yeah. Everyone
Universe
does.
responds. Yeah.
Well, we'll see you at the Dragon's Lair.
We'll smell you at the Dragon's
Smell you later.
Smell you later, guys.
Burn This Book is produced by us, Nicolle Corin and Eden Wen.
Music by myself, Nicolle, and performed by my dad, Frank.